cowboy saw bruises on her arms and whispered, "Pack your things, you belong with me now." Montana Territory, spring of 1881. The wind came sharp off the Beartooth Range that morning, dragging the scent of pine and thawing snow as Caleb Morgan rode into Ashridge. His boots were dusted with trail grit, and there was dried blood on his knuckles. The kind of mark that didn't need explaining out here. He wasn't planning to stay. Just water the horse, grab some tobacco, maybe trade for a fresh bar of soap. But as he stepped onto the warped wooden porch of Merritt's General Store, he saw her. She stood just inside the doorway, sleeves rolled to the elbows, sorting tins of peaches with the quiet precision of someone used to being invisible. That was the first thing he noticed, her stillness in the noise of a waking town. The second was the bruises, faint but not old, deep purple rings on pale skin, finger-shaped. She turned and caught him looking. No flinch. No shame, just a straight stare. "I don't need pity," she said, voice like Riverstone, worn smooth, solid. "I don't offer it," he replied. She blinked once, then turned back to the shelf. He stepped closer. "Name's Caleb Morgan," he offered, "just passing through." A pause, then, "Clara Wynne. You work here?" "I do what needs doing." She didn't smile. He didn't expect her to. That's when the door creaked open behind them, and a voice barked through the cold air. "You done stacking those yet, girl?" Caleb turned. Merritt, barrel-chested, neck thick with power, anger already rising on his face like heat. Clara straightened her back, but Caleb saw it, the flinch just behind her ribs. "Yes, Mr. Merritt," she said, calm. Merritt sneered past Caleb and disappeared behind the counter. Caleb didn't move. Not yet. Then he said low, "You run this place, or does he?" Clara didn't answer. Caleb nodded toward the door. "Pack your things," she blinked. "Excuse me? You're not staying here. You don't even know me." "I know what I saw." She stared at him like he'd just spoken in tongues. And maybe he had. The kind of language only people who'd carried bruises understood. "You can't just say that," she said. "I don't say things I don't mean." She turned, walked away. The bell above the door clanged as it closed behind her. He didn't follow, but he didn't leave either. That night, under a sky bruised like her arms, he stood across from the alleyway behind the store and waited. Just before dusk, she stepped out, a satchel in one hand, a blanket under the other. She didn't look back. Neither did he. They didn't speak as they rode out of Ashridge. Not for the first hour. Not when the town slipped behind them like a bad dream. Not when the pine trees swallowed the trail and the wind turned colder. Clara sat behind Caleb on his horse, her arms not quite touching his back. She didn't cling, didn't shake. She just stayed still, like someone learning what stillness meant again. The trail led them along the ridge, where the land dropped off into wide fields, the last of winter still clinging to the shadows. Caleb didn't look back, and neither did she. When the sun dipped low, painting the sky in dull gold, he guided the horse toward a clearing near a stream. The water ran cold and clean, murmuring over stones like it was speaking only to itself. Clara dismounted stiffly, boots crunching on frosted leaves. She didn't ask where they were. She only said, "Is this far enough?" Caleb nodded. Far enough to not look back. He unpacked his gear in silence, laid out a blanket, struck a fire from dry pine needles, handed her a strip of jerky without asking. She took it and sat a few feet away, cross-legged, eyes on the flames. "I don't know what I'm doing," she said after a long while. "You're leaving," he said. "That's enough for now." She glanced at him. "I don't even know where you're taking me." "South, to my land. It's quiet. There's water. A roof." He paused. "You want somewhere else? I'll take you there too. I'm not keeping you." Clara looked down at the dirt between her boots. "You said I was yours." He met her gaze steady. Not to own, to protect. Her breath hitched, almost invisible, but he caught it. "And if I don't want to stay?" she asked. "Then I ride you wherever you want to go," he said. "No questions, no strings. You say the word." She was quiet again. The fire crackled. The stream whispered behind them. The wind moved through the pines with a voice that almost sounded like memory. Clara spoke so softly it barely reached him. I don't want to keep living scared. Then don't, Caleb said. Not anymore. She didn't answer, but she didn't move away when he laid an extra blanket near her. She didn't sleep at first, just stared into the flames. Then slowly she lay back, her hands folded over her chest, eyes still open. He took first watch without saying he would, and sometime in the deepest part of the night, the hour when stars hang heavy and breath turns to mist, she turned onto her side, facing him. Not close, but not far either. The frost hadn't yet melted when morning came, but she was still there, still with him, still choosing, even in the silence. Montana Territory. 2 days later. The second morning broke with low fog curling through the trees, hanging like breath held too long. The fire from last night had burned down to a quiet ash glow, and the stream murmured nearby. Steady, dependable. Caleb was already up, sleeves rolled, knife in hand as he shaved curls of bark from a fallen branch. Clara stirred beneath the blanket. Her hair had come loose in the night, and her eyes blinked slowly at the pale morning. She didn't ask where she was. She didn't ask why he hadn't left. She just sat up. I can help, she said, voice hoarse with sleep. Caleb looked over, then gave a single nod toward the creek. Water's clean. Fill the canteens. She took them without another word. Her boots sank lightly into the moss at the bank as she crouched. The tin dipped into the water, the cold biting at her fingers. But the ache steadied her somehow. The trees here were taller than back in town. Older, like they'd survived things. When she returned, Caleb had already strung a line between two trunks and was hanging strips of rabbit meat to dry. She handed him the canteens, then sat on a flat stone, brushing pine needles from her skirt. That land you mentioned, she said, not looking at him. Is it really yours? He paused, then nodded. Staked it 7 years ago. My brother and I worked it, built the cabin with our own hands. She didn't ask what happened to the brother. She didn't need to. But after a moment, she said, You still live there? Not for a while, he replied. Too quiet after he passed. How did he die? Fever, the kind that creeps in slow and doesn't leave. Stillness settled again, the kind that didn't ask to be filled. I've never slept outside before, she said. You sleep through the night? She nodded, almost surprised. Didn't expect to. He set the knife down and looked at her, not with pity, but something deeper. You don't owe me anything, he said. I know, she murmured, but her voice caught. But I feel like I should say something. You don't have to explain the bruises. I wasn't going to, she said quickly. Then softer. I stayed too long. I knew what kind of man he was. I just forgot I deserved better. Caleb didn't speak. He didn't have to. She hugged her knees and stared out into the woods. A squirrel darted across a fallen log, rustling the silence just enough. When I was a girl, I used to read about the Oregon Trail, she said. Thought I'd end up west, maybe with a family. Just never figured it'd be like this. You still could, Caleb said. She gave a bitter chuckle. With who? He didn't answer. By early afternoon, they were back in the saddle, the trail narrowing through pine and shale. She rode behind him again, and though she didn't hold tight, her knees brushed his hips now and then with the horse's stride. The sun slipped behind a low ridge as they reached a clearing, the ring of old stones where someone had camped before. Caleb dismounted, tying the horse to a nearby branch. Clara followed, stretching her legs with a soft groan. He unpacked what little they carried, then knelt to gather kindling. She knelt beside him, pulling dead branches into a pile without being asked. A sharp twig bit into her hand, drawing blood. She hissed through her teeth and tried to wave it off. But Caleb was already beside her, pulling a clean cloth from his saddlebag. Let me see. It's nothing. Still, let me. She held her hand out. His fingers, rough from years of labor, wrapped the cloth gently around hers. He tied it snug, but not tight. When he was done, he didn't let go right away. You always take care of people you barely know? She asked, not looking up. Only the ones who matter. She blinked, lowered her hand. Didn't answer. Later, after the fire was lit and their simple supper eaten in silence, Clara sat cross-legged near the flames. The night pressed in around them like a heavy wool blanket. "Did he hit you too?" she asked suddenly. Her voice didn't shake, but it landed hard. Caleb looked up from where he'd been checking his saddle straps. "My brother?" She nodded. "No," he said. "He was my only good thing for a long time." She processed that slowly. "That's why you saw it," she murmured, "on the bruises, the flinching. You knew." "I knew." Clara laid down with her back to the fire, head resting on her satchel. She didn't look at him again that night, but she didn't move when he walked over and draped a second blanket over her shoulders. In the dark, she whispered to the trees, more to herself than to him, "I don't know if I can be anything else yet." From where he sat, firelight flickering across his boots, Caleb answered softly, "You don't have to be anything but alive." She didn't reply. But her breathing steadied, and he stayed awake a while longer. Not because he needed to keep watch, but because it had been a long, long time since someone trusted him enough to fall asleep that close. The sky was soft gray when they reached the valley 2 days later. A low mist clung to the ground, rising in threads around the horses' hooves. Pines gave way to open fields, and the land began to feel different. Not wild, but waiting. Ahead, tucked at the base of a bluff, sat a small cabin. One room, tin roof, porch sagging slightly with age. Smoke curled faintly from the chimney. Not fresh, just the ghost of old fires. Clara leaned forward in the saddle as it came into view. She didn't speak. Caleb dismounted first. His boots crunched against the earth, and he reached up to help her down. She hesitated, then let him. "You leave it like this all this time?" she asked, her voice quiet. "Checked it once a month," he said. "Never stayed long." She stood still a moment, fingers flexing as if testing whether she belonged here. Then she walked past him, across the creaking porch boards, and stepped inside without waiting for permission. He didn't stop her. The door swung open with a dry groan. Inside, the air smelled of cedar dust and pine ash. A narrow cot sat against the wall, a table by the hearth, shelves lined with empty jars and a folded blanket. Everything simple, but everything clean. She turned slowly in the center of the room. Her eyes caught on the cracked mirror above the basin, the coat hook by the door, the one tin plate on the shelf. Caleb stood in the doorway, not stepping in. "It's yours now," he said. She didn't look at him when she answered. "I don't know what I want yet." "I'll sleep in the barn," he offered. "Give you space." "I didn't ask you to." "I know. Didn't say you did." There was a pause, then she crossed her arms, dropped them, and said, "You ever get tired of doing what's right?" "I get tired," Caleb said, "but not of that." She nodded once, then walked to the window, unlatched the shutter, and let the golden spill of late sun in. It lit the floorboards like a promise. For the first time since they left Ashridge, she smiled. Small, not showy, but real. That evening, Clara cooked. Beans and salt pork in the hearth. She moved through the kitchen without asking where anything was. Hands confident, feet sure. Caleb split wood outside until he smelled the food and came in, wiping sweat from his brow. She handed him a plate without looking up. "Thank you," he said. "You don't have to keep saying that." "I will anyway." They ate at the table, knees brushing beneath the wood. Neither spoke much, but neither seemed to mind the silence. When she stood to wash the dishes, he reached for the bucket. "I'll do it," she said. "You've done enough." "So have you." She handed him the plate. Later, after the fire had died down and the room fell into the hush of twilight, she stepped onto the porch, arms wrapped around her knees. Caleb came out a few minutes after, a blanket slung over one shoulder. "You cold?" he asked. She shook her head. "Just thinking." He didn't ask what about, just stood beside her, eyes on the stars emerging one by one. "You can sit if you want," she said. He sat, slowly, shoulders stiff, joints aching from the ride in the years. Their arms didn't touch. But the space between them felt chosen now, not cautious. "Tomorrow," Clara said, "I want to gather some herbs." He looked at her. "I remember what grows near creek beds. My mother used to dry them for tea and poultices. Healing herbs, not magic. Just enough to do some good." His voice softened. "You keep surprising me." I haven't even started." They stayed there side by side until the stars brightened and the air turned cool. Then Clara rose first and stepped inside, leaving the door slightly open. When Caleb came in later, he found a folded blanket left on the barn door latch. She hadn't said anything about it, but she didn't need to. He rested a hand on the wool before lifting it. She didn't owe him anything, but still, she left it there. A choice, not an obligation. And in the hush of the barn, he lay down on the hay with the soft weight of that choice across his chest. The rain came 2 days later. Not harsh, just steady. A spring kind of rain. It tapped the cabin roof like a soft drum beat, as if reminding them the world was still turning. Clara stood barefoot on the porch, sleeves rolled to her elbows, arms crossed. The hem of her skirt darkened with wet, but she didn't flinch. She watched the horizon through the rain, eyes calm, lips still. Her hair had come undone again, strands curling near her temple, damp and quiet. Inside, Caleb was sanding the edge of a warped beam above the hearth. He'd meant to fix it since Wesley's last winter, but never found the reason. Now he had one, and it wasn't the roof. "Do you have any tools I can use?" she called, her voice gentle but clear. He set down the plane. "For what?" "Stitching. I want to make a curtain for the window, something to keep the cold from slipping in." He nodded toward a chest near the cot. "Thread and needles are in there, if the mice haven't eaten them." She stepped inside, leaving the door ajar behind her. Her feet left damp prints across the floor, but she didn't seem to notice. She knelt beside the chest, opened it, and sifted through its contents like she was rummaging through someone else's life. Respectful, but without fear. She found what she needed wrapped in oilcloth, sat near the fire, pulled a folded flour sack from her satchel, and began measuring it with her hands, muttering numbers under her breath. He watched her work for a while. Quiet, focused, confident. "My mother used to say to patch everything twice before throwing it out," she said, not looking up. "Said a worn hem could carry memories you'd miss if you were in too much of a hurry." "You talk about her like she's still alive," and he said gently. "She's not," Clara replied, "but her lessons stay." He added a log to the fire. The scent of pine rose with the smoke, warm and familiar. Her stitches were clean even, deliberate. When she tied off the final knot, she held the curtain up to the light. "It won't win any praise, but it'll do." "It's more than good," Caleb said. She pinned it to the frame, using small nails from a drawer, her jaw set with quiet pride as she lined the edge. When she finished, she turned to him. "You kept this place ready," she said, "even when you didn't know why." "I wasn't sure what I was keeping it for." Clara studied him. No smile, no softness, just something steady. "And now I think I know." That night, they sat across from each other at the table, sharing a bowl of cornmeal and onion stew. Rain still whispered on the roof, but inside the warmth held close. "I saw a deer near the creek this morning," she said. "Doe with a fawn. Didn't mention it earlier. I wanted to see if they'd come back." "Maybe they will," Caleb said. "This land's kinder than most if you treat it right." She traced the rim of her tin cup with her thumb. "I didn't think I'd ever feel safe again." "You don't have to decide anything tonight," he said. "I already have." She didn't say it with drama, just a quiet truth. And in the silence that followed, something deep and long-awaited settled between them. It didn't need to be named. She stood first, gathered the dishes. He moved to help, but she raised a hand. "Let me serve you once," she said. "Just tonight." He let her. Later, when the fire had burned low, he stepped onto the porch. The rain had softened into a mist, and the moon peeked through cracks in the clouds. He didn't hear her footsteps, but he felt her presence. She stood beside him, shoulder close but not touching. "This place," she said, voice low, "it feels like it could grow something." "It already is." She turned to him then. There was something in her eyes he hadn't dared hope for, something unsheltered. "I don't want to sleep alone tonight," she said. "Not because I'm afraid, because I want to know how it feels to be wanted without fear." He didn't reach for her. She stepped closer, laid her palm on his chest. "You said I was yours," she whispered. "I believe you now, not because you claim me, but because you never took." He lowered his face to hers, slow, certain, and kissed her once. The kind of kiss that doesn't prove a thing, the kind that simply means I'm here. That night they lay side by side beneath the same blanket, her head tucked beneath his chin. His arm around her waist. Neither spoke. Neither needed to. Outside, the land breathed slow under a sky rinsed clean. And inside, two people who had carried too much for too long finally let themselves rest in something new. Something earned, something home.